And welcome back to the Energy Mixx Radio Show, where we bring clarity to the conversations shaping Texas energy and community resilience. I'm your host, Kym Bolado, and today we're diving into a topic that's hitting close to home: water shortages in Corpus Christi and what they mean for the future of energy in South Texas. Corpus Christi has long been a cornerstone of our energy corridor, but recent developments have seriously raised concerns for the state of Texas. The city, with over 757 million in low-interest loans and 232 million in bonds to fund their desal infrastructure, funds to begin the initial planning and was well into the process, but then they had new city council that came into place, and the vote moved from being forward with the desal to being struck down. That leaves Corpus Christi in a very precarious position. Millions already have been borrowed from the state, and the bonding rating now under scrutiny. And growing pressure from industry giants like ExxonMobil and other operators who depend on reliable water access has come to the forefront. Joining me today is Chairman Jim Wright of the Texas Railroad Commission, who's been working closely with Corpus Christi leadership. Help them understand the gravity of this moment. And we'll talk about what happens next, what the governor has said, and whether the state of Texas may step in. And so let's get into it. Commissioner Wright, welcome back to the Energy Mixx Radio Show.
Kym, thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure to come and be on your show with you. And thank you for promoting all the good things you do for our energy sources here in Texas. Your question surrounds Corpus Christi and the water situation they find themselves in today. And I think it's important that people know that Corpus Christi's current surface water sources, Lake Mathis and Choke Canyon, are down below 13% in their reservoir today, which is pretty low. Fortunately, they do have a pipeline that comes from Lake Texana that delivers somewhere between 60 and 70 million gallons to the community every day. Of course, they have a bigger need when it comes to residential use and commercial use, which is where some of the concerns have been coming from. As we all know, they received a permit that they worked very hard to get on desal in a location they refer to as the Inner Harbor location. It started out with actually three different estimates: one low, one in the middle of the road, and then one that came back very, very high. And I think you saw concerns from the current council, or some of the current council members, where they wanted to get more accuracy in what that spend may be as they go into the future. I'm confident that I think they will end up figuring a way to move forward with that permit. I don't know the timing of that yet, but in my conversations with them, I had suggested that they possibly look at some type of public-private partnership if they were concerned about those costs moving forward. I know that they've gotten committals from the state funding sources on those numbers that you had just talked about earlier. I'm not sure that they've expanded the majority of that money. In fact, I think they're only into that money today around the tune of about $50 million, which is still a lot of money if they had to pay that back. But I do think that as we move forward, and I think it will be sooner than later, they will come up with a way to try to get that thing moving forward. I know in the interim, there are other water sources, and there are, such as pulling water out from underground aquifers. But a lot of that, and along with the desal, carries some pretty big cost that is going to be placed on the consumer. And I think that Corpus is also evaluating that. And is there any other alternative water sources that could help blend with those so that they can stay competitive in the water market with other areas throughout Texas and adjoining states?
Well, Chairman Wright, I did want to address, my job is to cover news of anything pertaining to energy, but I do divulge, I have a home near there. I believe that Corpus Christi is my second home and the wonderful people that live there. So my goal is not to in any way, shortchange the wonderful people and the, seasoned and newly elected officials in any way. I just really want to try to see if there's any information out there that you can share with us of where we are, because it is such a vital topic for that area. So our show is more exploratory, and hopefully we can say some things that might help educate anyone listening in the Corpus Christi area that's kind of confused or not really understanding what's at stake here. And so I want to say I just left a meeting, a London, put on by the Public Policy Foundation, who does a lot of advocacy work. They get a lot of bills signed into
Great
law. They do an
organization. Yeah.
amazing job. Great organization. And some of it is energy. And, Commissioner Wright, Commissioner Wright, that being said, I just wanted to say that I hope this show will lead more into information that's important to what they need to know, the residents of Corpus Christi and how they're voting. So let's begin with, I want to back up a little bit because you said a lot in the intro. And it's over a lot of people's head right now because they may not really even understand what's happening. This show airs in Texas and outside of Texas, and my hope is to help other cities and municipalities understand energy is a complicated topic. This is why I've been on the air for so long. And water is vital to pushing the agenda forward for a lot of different reasons. We want to, produce data centers, you're going to need water. You want to produce oil and gas, which provides Texas a lot of taxes. We're going to need water. We need period, and it's so vital. So let's start with the basics, okay? Corpus Christi applied for the grants, and they used it. Okay, so now that they've put the initial vote through with the previous elected body, they may not have done what they needed to do, which is to where it could not be changed, that it was solid. And now they have new city council people that came in that had a different view. And now they voted down the desal, but there's already money that's been borrowed, money that's been used, and they have obligations. And so this is going to fall on the taxpayers' back if they can't figure out. So we know that some industries have said there's not enough water. We're going to pull out potentially if we don't find a solution and quickly. Corpus Christi's got a lot of problems that they're dealing with as a result of this. And we're going to break this down. Now, Commissioner Wright, I want to start with you. Thank you for your intro in helping our listeners understand, what. I want to give them a little bit of what's been happening behind the scenes. This has been a process that's been ongoing for a couple of years now. And Corpus Christi finds itself in a precarious situation with they need water, not just for the residents, but they need water for industry. At some point, this starts really hurting their economics as well if they don't find a solution. When the previous elected body agreed to push through the desalination, they might not have done their full due diligence in pushing through a vote that would not allow potential new elected officials to come in and challenge it, and they didn't. And so this is exactly what's happened. And now that grants have been issued, money has been used. And again, I don't think it's any one person's fault. I think no one could really see that this would happen, but we're here now. And the initiation for the desalination planning and the city council voting it down now, how does it leave Corpus Christi in the terms of the money they borrowed and the obligation they face? I want to address that first because I think it's important that we understand the situation they're in.
Yeah, Kym, I'll give you the best way that I understand it. I don't know that I have all the facts on that, but from what I understand, Corpus received a low interest loan committed for like $222 million. And again, I don't know if that's a real accurate number. I know it was north of 200 million. I think currently they have spent somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 million of that commitment, and they still have the balance sitting in a trust to move forward with their desal. I think it's important that people around the community, especially in Corpus Christi, understand that water is very, very important, not only for survival, but I think people need to understand that water also feeds industry. industry feeds jobs. Jobs feed our economy. Without that industry, you don't really have a community that has the ability to survive. Without that water, you don't have a community that has the ability to survive. So I think when you look back at the history of the desal and what happened years ago, whenever they started looking at this, they received some estimates that said that they felt like that plant was going to cost them just a little north of $200 million. And of course, over time, prices have changed. In fact, prices have gone way up. So their next estimate was about $775 million. And then just in a couple of months, they changed that price to where they're estimating it now at $1.2 billion. So I think when you saw what council's stance was, Corpus Christi's council, I can see where they feel like there's some confusion there. And I think what they did in this last thing was said, look, we just don't have enough surety on moving forward, which I see that side. But what I'm not seeing is the recognition of the leaders in Corpus that they are in emergency conditions today, and that they have to come up with some water sources that are not only a source that we can rely on, but they're going to have to stay competitive in the water market in order to keep industry and people moving to our community to continue the growth. I mean, Corpus is poised for huge growth today. We've seen the expansion of the new bridge, which allows bigger ships to come in to move more cargo. We've seen the expansion of our canal that brings those ships in off the Gulf to be deepened to handle bigger ships. I mean, we're poised to be and continue to be the leader of exporting energy that we generate here in Texas. So yeah, you're right. Water for Corpus Christi is highly important. I think you had inquired or you just asked about, what should the next steps be? I think that they need to continue. I think they need to find a resolution to put in that desal operation, whether that's through a public-private partnership, which I think would be the fastest way of moving that thing forward and seeing it into a reality, in my own opinion. And then I think they need to continue to look at other sources that can be a source of water that could dilute what these escalated costs might be in the desal efforts or in water well aquifer things that they're doing today, which is going to be price increases. And the reason I say that, I think it's important for our community to stay competitive in the water market just to continue the growth that we've been experiencing.
Commissioner Wright, let's take a quick break. When we return, we're going to drill down into that just a few segments in. I want to come back and talk about the Moody bond rating and what that means for them, because right now they're facing a whole lot of challenges. I want to continue on that before we start looking at solutions. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. We'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. My guest today is Chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission, Jim Wright. Commissioner Wright, thank you for joining me today to talk about some potential solutions that Corpus Christi might be able to fit into. And hopefully this is what this show is about, is talking about where they might be able to go. But I still want to continue to break down all of where we've been to help our listeners understand now how do we get out of here. So when they voted down the bond, when they voted down that they were not going to permit desal to continue the permitting, despite the fact that we mentioned in the last segment all the millions of dollars they've already put into the Corpus Christi coffers to do this. They have the support of the governor of Texas. This is an important thing that we get done to continue to build off of the Port of Corpus Christi, because since it's the number one energy export in North America. These industries need water. So do the residents. And so it was a pretty important vote that got shot down. Right after that, though, the vote came down against sinking the desal plant. The city received a letter from its Moody bond rating agency, which has now accelerated its review of the Corpus Christi credit rating, citing concerns specifically over water supply planning, reserve levels, and the utility rate decision. How critical in your opinion, is this moment for the city's financial reputation? And could a downgrade mean for what does it mean for taxpayers, infrastructure, investment, and long-term growth? I really want to explain to our listeners where they've been, unfortunately, and now where they find themselves today. And then we're going to go into some potential solutions a little bit later on in the show. So, what's happening with the Moody bond
Well, I
potential
mean,
here?
the Moody bond is really, when you base that on common sense, what they've seen is now is there is a possibility that Corpus will not have the supply to continue its growth, which is what those bond ratings are usually set on. What does their economy look like? What does their future growth also look like? Well, when you don't have water, that impedes that future growth tremendously. So I know that that the Moody system, the bond rating company has got some serious concerns about, what is Corpus going to do to have guarantee in water supply, which is why I think they sent the letter to want to move up that audit quicker than they had planned to do. And if for some reason they lose some ratings on their bonds, then that means that money will become even more expensive to get their hands on to develop these water sources. So, I mean, none of this stuff is good. I think Corpus has got to recognize that they've got to make some certainty in their decision process, and they've got to do it quickly.
Right. So if they do take a lower rating in their bond, does this also, so maybe someone is listening and saying, well, this only going to affect water and we'll figure it out. It doesn't. It's going to affect
No, it
any
affects
kind of
everything.
money that they're borrowing, right?
It affects
Infrastructure,
everything. Yes,
everything. So this is
everything will
not
become more expensive. So.
right. And of course, we already know who is going to have to, of course, pay that would be, of course, the citizens. So let me ask you, with Corpus Christi bond already under a negative outlook and the recent vote to halt the Inner Harbor desal project, which is raising red flags, are they risking the future potential for industrial expansion and regional security? What steps do you think that the city leaders need to take right now to restore? And I know you said they need to vote yes, but I don't necessarily know if that's in line with some city council people really feel this is a bad idea to move forward with it. So there may not be a united let's vote. Is there anything that the city can do? The city manager, the city mayor, the people who are in favor? Is there anything that you see that they can do to start moving this forward without maybe actually taking a vote, or what is it that they need to do? Do
Sure,
research, find solutions?
yeah, some of the meetings that I've had with Corpus and the surrounding communities here, my suggestion to them has always been, look, guys, I think all of you need to get in one room with a whiteboard. And on that whiteboard, I think you guys need to start identifying what potential water sources are. And when you identify those, you need to list them in one, two, three, four. Number one being the most safe and most economical, and go down from there. So, in talking to them, I think that they have other alternatives to go find other water sources that will meet slot number one. Slot number two may not be as economical, but it will be a safe source in developing more groundwater access to aquifers in conjunction with surrounding communities. I think that is something they're going to have to put in their forecast for their future. And then again, this is all overlaid by what is your plan to do with a permit that I know myself, I tried to help Corpus and did help Corpus a lot trying to obtain that permit. And I think that is something that they need to continue to develop. What that looks like, I myself had suggested that they look more at a public-private partnership, so that if something happens to their bond rating, or if something happens from the state where they don't have confidence in them in developing these water sources and don't make the money that they need available, at least they've got somebody that would have pockets to go out and build the desal plant. But those are all things that needed to really happen yesterday. So I've been encouraging, I keep encouraging them to please look at things in that context as we move forward, in the coming days.
Well, I want to talk about Governor Abbott, but I'm leery to say this, but I feel the need to say it. When you're elected to office, you're elected because of your integrity. People are believing and buying into what you're saying. Now we have some new elected officials that got on the city council, and they're not really for this. But I wonder, in some ways, well, what are you for? Because if you're not realizing this may not be the perfect vehicle, but what your legacy may be is that you were elected, and ever since you were elected, wrong decisions really cost the poor, the city, and the surrounding counties a lot of businesses and produced a negative economic development. And Chairman Wright, I don't think that anybody who's recently elected and or who's voting against this is really for that, but I don't think they really have a solution. But it is them that I believe
Yeah,
that they really need.
yeah, that's what I've said earlier, Kim. The most important thing right now is they need to develop a path quickly, and they need to follow that path. And like I said earlier, I think there are options with the desal overlying that, which would keep them to where they would have the supply of water to meet their future needs and their immediate needs. But they've also got to look at that from an economic side of things. I cannot say that they've done that correctly. I think they have created a lot of people with the thoughts in their head of not having confidence in their leadership. But I feel like I'm in defense of that. I would have some hesitancy if my price went from 200 million to 1.2 billion and didn't really understand why those dramatic increases, even with the cost of things that have gone up. I think that was the question, and that question resulted in them not pursuing and moving forward with it. I do think that they're sitting back today and they're trying to figure out what is the best way to pursue forward, because I don't know that anybody in their right mind would not think that desal is not going to have to be part of that solution for people in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Absolutely. So let's take a quick break. When we return, I want you to explain to me what Governor Abbott's position is, weighing in on that. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. We'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. My guest today is Chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission, Jim Wright. Now, Chairman Wright, so Corpus Christi isn't the first community to have faced something like this. These are people who are elected and they're trying to do the very best they can, but they are certainly not water experts or engineers. And so, as you mentioned earlier in the show, they have questions. Things seem to be changing, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's more of how do we get everybody up to speed to start moving in the right direction. Meanwhile, our governor, who is, of course, responsible for the state, and may potentially be looking at, we have the number one energy export in North America, and they need water. How do we assist them? So we've heard from Governor Abbott. He's weighed in on this issue. And so what do you think, Governor Abbott, and what is the state, what are they saying pertaining to the decisions around water infrastructure in Corpus Christi? Are they weighing in at, I mean, I know they are saying something, but what are they weighing in on? And as the Railroad Commission, do you kind of think that it's in line with what Corpus Christi is looking at as well?
Well, let me start from the beginning there, and just so I have a disclaimer here. I have not met personally with the governor's office or anyone in the governor's office over the situation in Corpus Christi. I have heard things about what's happened there, and I do think that the governor, given what you just see happening today, there is some lost confidence in Corpus having the ability to identify water sources and plan on bringing them in and what the timing of that's going to look like. And in doing so, there could be action coming out of the governor's office. I'm not sure what he has in authority exactly when it comes to water, but I will give an example. There was a bill created a couple of legislative sessions ago called House Bill 40, where a lot of municipalities were saying, look, we don't want horizontal drilling done underneath our city. And that, if you look at the state of Texas, I would say that probably a third of Texas is cities. So what cities were trying to basically do was to get the authority to either allow or disallow for us to continue to develop our oil and gas in Texas, which we know how important that is for our state. So House Bill 40 was mainly developed to say, look, cities do not necessarily have the authority to stop that expansion, of drilling and collecting oil and gas, which is one of the biggest things that our economy thrives on. There's a lot more to House Bill 40, but I don't know that you can take a paintbrush and paint that House Bill 40 over water. I'm just not that familiar with it. But I am sure that in some way, somehow, that the governor is going to continue to look at the situation in Corpus Christi, because you hit the nail on the head. Corpus Christi is the nation's largest exporter of our oil and gas.
Mhm.
And I don't see that the governor is going to sit there and watch things continue to go on like we've seen here in the past few months. But I do again have confidence that the leaders in Corpus Christi will come up with a solution. Hopefully in a timely solution, and I think it will be based on the criteria that I've strongly suggested to not only them but other communities, that we stay cognizant of what those sources are, how quickly can we get to them, are they safe, and are they economic for our people and for our industry.
Well, Commissioner Wright, you mentioned, thank you for bringing up House Bill 40, but I also want to remind our listeners that not too long ago, the state of Texas also stepped in for conservatorship of failing school districts. And now we have legislation that is also allows now school choice, which congratulations, and I'm very happy for that. But if we're looking at this is, a port that is the number one, like you said, in energy export and crude, and second in LNG. And this is an important, vital area for oil and gas, as you mentioned, House Bill 40, and then us seeing that the state has stepped in and passed pertaining to schools. It might make sense that given enough time of no decision, that is the decision, right? No
You're right,
decision is
Kim.
a
I mean,
decision.
it certainly could happen, and I would see it happening if our leaders in Corpus Christi and the communities here do not develop a pretty strong plan and do it quickly and pursue in developing those plans, which includes something with that desal permit. I think the desal is more of a roof that's over the top of these other sources. We have to plan our future not based on rainfall. We have to plan our future in another way. As we've seen, everything pretty much west of the 98th meridian today is in severe drought conditions.
Yeah,
So, it's not just Corpus Christi. There are a lot of communities that are in need of water. And I
absolutely.
think I think it's time that, a lot of us have got to start thinking outside the box of where this water is going to come from.
Right. And money, while it is important and everything, I want to give you an opportunity to discuss this. We're going to return from break, and now we're going to talk about Chairman Wright's potential solutions. But one of them might be this amount of money you're spending now may not even seem like anything in the future if you get your water going now. But let's take a quick break. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show, and we'll return. And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mixx Radio Show. My guest today is Chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission, Jim Wright. Commissioner Wright, you pretty much are the expert as far as the regulatory body. There are a few that also work closely with you guys, TCEQ, the General Land Office, but the amount of money that the state of Texas receives from oil and gas exploration is in the billions. It actually is solely responsible for budgeting the state of Texas every legislative session. We've hit record highs in producing energy, and it has been to the benefit of the citizens of Texas in how that money has been used. And it has helped everyone from schools, elderly, taxes, you name it. When the state is running low, that money is a nice cushion to have. And so energy is vital to the state of Texas, and our Texas legislators get it. But your body alone, your agency as chairman, is the single most important agency that regulates the oil and gas industry. So if anybody knows, how important Corpus Christi is and how are we going to deal with this, it'd probably be you guys, along, of course, working with other agencies. So I want to start with giving you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about. So now Corpus Christi has found themselves in a pickle that, by the way, any city could have found themselves in, right? These are elected officials who may be a
Yes,
doctor, a
yes.
lawyer. They're not experts in water. They're not water engineers or whatever you would call them. Um, how are they supposed to truly understand and be an expert when they've hired? They thought they did their due diligence, and now they find themselves in a very strange situation. So, look, give us some solutions. I know because you are from Corpus, you are working closely with the elected officials, the mayor, and them. Everybody wants to do what's in the best interest of Corpus. So, what are some of your solutions that you potentially find to be attractive that they could maybe immediately jump into and start working towards to give the state of Texas, the governor, and these energy companies out there the belief that we are going to find a solution? What are some of the things?
I think, Kym, it's important for everybody to understand when you talked about earlier the oil and gas business and what that means for Texas. And I'll put this really simply so that people do understand. Oil and gas for the state of Texas is 38% of our GDP. I mean, that's pretty huge.
That
There's
goes
no
away. 38% of our GDP goes away. We're in a world of hurt.
We're in a world of hurt. You're exactly right. And another way of looking at oil and gas and what that's done for Texas in context is we're the eighth largest economy in the world. Texas is alone. I mean, that's saying a lot. And it's oil and gas that has given us the ability to say that.
I
So
think
I
the
just
next one too is, and I just heard this in the luncheon, is France.
That's
France.
correct. And if our trajectory stays the way it is, we should be surpassing France. So I mean, we may be moving into that seventh slot. I know the governor likes to say that a lot, and I believe him. If we continue the trajectory that we've been on, Texas is a very blessed state to have all the natural resources that we have. It's a very good state to do business in. We have people moving to this state in record numbers, over 1,200 people a day. We have industry moving to this state every day. It's important that not just the state leaders, but the local leaders recognize the infrastructure that we've got to build. We've got to keep up with to continue that type of growth. So, as I said earlier, I was talking to the communities about, hey, let's write on a whiteboard, what are some sources of water? Let's start with, what is a safe source? And what's the most economical? Well, I know where there's a lot of water. In fact, I know where there is 30 million barrels a day that's being re-injected under the surface into formations. And I think people need to understand we refer to that water as produced water. It's water that comes up alongside of our crude oil and natural gas, usually high in salinity, higher than what you would normally find in your oceans. But I think people need to understand why that's becoming an issue in Texas. As I think everyone has seen, we've been experiencing some seismicity in our producing regions in Texas.
Jim, let me break this down real quick. When you say salinity, this is salt, it's salty water, brackish water that's coming back
Correct.
reproduced. Okay. And then you're also saying seismicity, which is we are having to right now because we cannot find a place for this salty water that's coming up for the exploration. We can't find a place for it. So
Well, I think it's important that people understand when you say we can't find a place, what's happening.
Right
What's
now we can't
happened?
find a place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's happened in the oil and gas business, and I think it's important that, Texas back in the 70s and 80s, we were not really a producing state. We were not producing that much oil because we felt like we were running out of oil. It was in around 2008 to 2010 when we discovered horizontal drilling, which allowed us to go into really tight formations and start fracking to develop other oil and gas sources, which has really broken the lid off of what we're doing in Texas today. That's kind of new. If you look at that, that's about 15 years old.
Right.
I don't think that anybody contemplated that we could not return the water from where it came that's produced alongside that oil and gas. But what's happening today is we're having to put it in formations from where it didn't come. Deeper formations put more pressure on fault lines, which causes seismicity. Shallower formations that are above that producing zone that we can't re-inject that water back into causes overpressurization. Overpressurization can lead to potential contamination of our groundwater sources. So both of those things are hard stops for our oil and gas industry if they become serious issues. And I think it's important to know that we have got to find other areas of use for that produced water. Well, to me, it's common sense to know that the drought conditions that we're experiencing in Texas west of the 98th and having that magnitude of water, and given the way the technology has advanced today in treating that water, even to levels where there's nothing in it. It's basically free of minerals, which would not be necessarily good. But the treatment today is unbelievable. Technology has gone a long way. The economics work for that. I think whenever I talk to the communities and I said, let's list that on a whiteboard, to me, where would I get the cheapest water source, the most safest water source, and a water source that would be there from now on? Produced
Absolutely.
water is my answer to that. How do I
Excellent.
get water to places that where I need it? We have a lot of rivers in this state, a lot of rivers, and that water can be carried through those rivers, just like rain water is carried through those rivers every day. So I think that is one of the things that I've encouraged people, especially in Corpus Christi, to really start paying attention to, because that cheap water source could help dilute these more expensive water sources, such as desal or wells that are drilled into aquifers that are going to need some form of treatment in either reverse osmosis or desalination itself. We have to look at that as a region here along the coastal bend, because places like Houston and Louisiana, God has blessed them. They get rain all the time. They don't have water issues like we have here. And
Yeah.
for us to remain competitive, for us to keep people moving to our community, those are the things that our leaders have got to start thinking about.
So Jim, let's take a quick break. When we return, I want to get back on. Okay, so we have this, potential use of produced water. You also talked a little, I'd like you to talk a little bit about private partnerships as well as a potential solution. You're listening to the Energy Mix Radio Show. We'll be right back. Um,
I'm
I
rushing,
just,
Kim, because I've got about 5 minutes before I have to leave.
okay. Callum, we're good. We got 8 minutes. Can I get
Okay. Yep.
Look, you know what? Just cut off when you can, and I'll put produce commercials in there.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
here
can
we
just go to, I'll start timer for 5 now. All right.
Okay, perfect. And we're back. You're listening to the Energy Mix Radio Show. My guest today is Chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission, Jim Wright. Um, Sir, before the break, you were talking to us a little bit about what is an abundance in the state of Texas, which is produced water. And as the Railroad Commission, you guys are finding places that you have to put it back into the ground, which is causing additional, problems as anything does, symptoms of what you're doing. And yet there's other parts of the state of Texas that desperately need water that you're saying could potentially use this water as opposed to us putting it back into the ground. And you suggested it potentially for Corpus Christi. But you've also made reference to that you believe very strongly in private and public partnerships. Can you go into great detail on that in the last segment of our show?
Well, yeah, I do. I do believe in public-private partnerships because I think that's a way that we make sure that we're consistent in what people are paying for the product. I've seen a lot of governments that have tried to go out and get into businesses. My experience has been more on the landfill side, and most of the time they're just not really great at operating those businesses, and usually people end up paying more when they're municipally owned and operated, where I've seen public-private partnerships be way more competitive in that arena. And I think all communities have got to start looking at, do I have the abundance of the things that I need to continue to grow? Do I have the infrastructure? And a lot of times, there's only so much money that these communities can qualify for. The alternative to that is public-private partnerships. And I think that Corpus Christi is a prime example of where they really need to take a hard look at that, especially when it comes to this desal plant. I think if you're looking for that plant to come online, the quickest possible way that it would be through some sort of public-private partnership in where the city didn't have to go get bonds or get loans from the state in order to operate them themselves that plant. I think that the the private part of that, certainly there are people that I'm aware of that has the funds to build, design, and operate a facility like that. And, to me, I would much rather want to know what my price of water is that I'm going to be paying not just now, but into the future, and what escalations are going to be put on that price as we move through the future. That's the certainty I think that the city council is searching for. I think public-private partnership answers that for them. And I think it's something that, I've said time and time again to them and the surrounding community, please at least consider that option.
Now, Commissioner Wright, let me ask you if you could get this up, Kym, waves her magic little wand and you've got it. Who are the maybe not so much the companies, but give us some ideas of what could the city of Corpus use immediately to get this going in a way that would reassure the state of Texas and its leadership and satisfy, of course, the oil and gas folks out there that we're going to have water coming on board. And they're not people who do not have experience in water. They actually do. They have the money. So how would Corpus get this off the ground? In what ways should they be moving towards with your expertise of how fast can they remedy this?
Well, I think if they look at it in the virtue of public-private partnership on both sides, not just with their desal permit that they have today, but also in utilizing produced water as part of their water sources. I think a public-private partnership is the quickest way for them to do that, and I think it's the most economical way for them to obtain that goal. In the produced water side, Corpus adds benefits to a private sector in that they could go out and get some of the money that's being made available to develop other water sources in Texas, which I'm very proud of legislation this last legislative session. They created a bill known as Senate Bill 7, and that bill essentially is allowing $1 billion a year, I believe, for the next 20 years to be utilized in Texas to develop water sources. That's supposed to be voted on by the voters in November, and hopefully it be passed, and we have access to that money as we move. I don't see an alternative for that when it comes to anybody that's living west of the 98th meridian.
Very good. Commissioner Wright, thank you for joining me for today's show. And is there anywhere that our listeners can go get information on what's happening besides Googling and looking at all the different media articles and stuff? But I'm just wondering where someone would go to kind of put their opinion on that they are moving towards. Let's start looking at this private-public partnership as a solution for our water needs in Corpus. Is there a collaboration effort, a coalition, anyone that is picking up?
There are a lot of associations that now are talking about water, developing water sources, all kinds of different developing water sources. That's a Google search. I would very much encourage people, if they want to get more educated on that, to do that. And then I would also say that, there's a lot of places around the world that are desaling, higher salt water to use as a water source. And there are a lot of companies that do that throughout the world. I can't encourage people enough to really search and kind of figure out what all that means, and even try to figure out, what is the cost when you're looking at a public-private partnership. I think that would help educate people a lot. And I think that's some of the issues that the council in Corpus Christi have faced, is that, I don't think a good job of educating people of what all this really means, that they've done a really great job at that.
Absolutely. Well, Chairman Wright, thank you again for joining us, helping us understand what's happening in Corpus Christi. And I'm glad that you're a part of the discussions to help the leadership understand energy requires water. Data centers, all of this stuff will lack in Corpus Christi if they don't address their water issues.
Infrastructure is important for anything. And again, people need to recognize, Kym, I think it's very important. A community only survives by its jobs and its industry. Without
Absolutely.
that, you don't have a community. So, I think it's important that people are educated in that process too. Of course, the way we approach that, invite them and develop that, needs to be done in a very safe and economical way. And I think that those are out there. We've just got to find them.
Thank you, Chairman Wright, for coming in. Look forward to having you back on the show in the future.
Thank you, Kym.